right, I am here. Whoa, I'm looking really large at the moment. Let me put that back. Oops, not over. Not over. What the heck? I'm zoomed in so far. All right, that's better. Let me just center. Stop turning camera. There we go. All right. Move it off center still. Other way. Hey, what a riveting beginning to the stream as I'm correcting my camera. Amazing. All right, how's everybody doing? Happy, I guess, Thursday as I'm recording this. Had my game last night, so I figured it's, as usual with such things, it is a great time to talk about it. I can think about kind of what lessons I learned, if any exist. Usually there's something, or just kind of, if anything, interesting situations came up, yada, yada, yada. Happy to talk about anything else that comes up in the chat, either related to my game or related to anything else. Just happy to be here. I'm pulling up my mind map because I was kind of giving it a little bit of an update. I'm slowly adding stuff in here just as it occurs. As it occurs to me, I really like mind mapping for being able to not only to be able to map relationships, or I guess being able to map relationships, whether it's spatial relationships of any kind, could be political, could be, I don't know, I want to say plot related to actions, consequences, that kind of stuff. You can kind of all meld it in here. This one is more or less a kind of a geopolitical mind map, though mixed in with other stuff. So I have a hub for Nobbs Hill, which is kind of their starting town. Quarry Bridge is sort of the town next door. The Caves of Chaos, right, would be maybe where they're going, and then kind of in between, connecting all of these. I'm just calling it right now, just kind of generically, the wilderness. It's all in this particular Vi County, but right now, just for ease of use, I'm calling it the wilderness. This game, so last night's session was a little bit short for a multitude of reasons, partly which was my fault. I was having some connectivity issues, some bandwidth issues. We play over Discord using Discord chat, and I was having the real robot voice issue, which usually happens when your just bandwidth is really low. So I was trying to figure that out and restarting, and I didn't have to go so far as to reset my router or do anything like that, but just seeing out closing anything I might have had running in the background, blah, 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 which just, it takes time and kind of eats away at the time. And of course, we did spend some time with, oh, hey, how are you? How's your family? Oh, my family's good. What did you guys do? That sort of thing. So we wrap all that together. Got a little bit of a late start. This was one of those sessions that I mentioned during the prep chat. I guess it was just yesterday if you were in the stream. I was expecting kind of a small, I mean small in the sense that not a lot of grand things are happening. No massive leaps of progress are being made. They're in town. They're kind of looking at their options. They were discussing whether to go on sort of a tear of vengeance or whether to be diplomatic. And they kind of touched upon all of that. But I started them back as, okay, you remember you guys had several plans, things you wanted to do, some of which were purely downtime, some of which were more active. And I wanted to just kind of nail them down as, okay, talking about a couple of plans and sort of taking impromptu votes of which plans you wanted to go with, but which ones are you actually going to do? There was the dwarven kind of a cleric-ish character, not really a cleric, but he has some martial abilities, some spellcasting abilities. Had found a couple of spells, and he had hired a magic user and was trying to entice the magic user to teach him a spell. So he's trying to figure out that. And because I don't have, I'm not using slots for spells. I'm using rolling against target numbers and various things go wrong. But one of the things I try to balance this out is it's not as easy to learn spells. You have to spend a good deal amount of downtime to pick up a spell. It's not something you can just do around the campfire. For spells that are relatively easy, depending on the level of the spellcaster, it takes a lot less time. When they get harder, it takes a lot longer. So if it's a higher level than you and you're trying to learn it, you can, but it's going to take you, weeks, and then you're just going to get one roll at the end of it. And if that roll doesn't go through, then you have to potentially spend weeks more relearning it. So it's not, so you have to make that investment of time a little bit carefully because you can't mix it in with other things. Like, no, you are on sabbatical. You are in the room. You are pouring through this thing to try to, this pouring through doing this study of the script or the scroll or whatever it is. And, you're on that. So you have to do that to the exclusion of other things. He picked the low hanging fruit, which was a first level spell, which now he's past there. It only takes a day or two, assuming you make your roll to do that. So a relatively short amount of downtime. Oh, and folks, let me know if I'm assuming since no one said anything that my voice is sounding good and levels are all nice and clear. So let me know about that. And also, while I have you in here, since I always leave it for the end, hey, give this a thumbs up if you enjoy these. Subscribe to the channel if you're in here and it sounds cool to you and you're not subscribed. Back to the action or sort of non-action. So he was trying to figure out, okay, can I get a day or so to learn this spell? And everyone's like, yeah, it's fine. We're going to do these other things. The other party members decided to split up, basically going to two different taverns. Again, if we recall, they were on doing this kind of PR campaign. Look how great we are. We're doing all this wonderful stuff for you. Remember our names. We're the Couriers. We're the good guys. Yay, yay, yay. And then Bogwig had shown up and thrown a big monkey wrench in those works. People were now very much sort of turning against them. And this PR stuff, which, as I mentioned before, one of Todd's laws, you try to have hirelings do things outside their specialty. No, they're not proficient. They're not good. So when you're having someone who is a barber surgeon by trade try to be your kind of troubadour, bard, PR person, it's not going to be particularly successful. So even before Bogwig interceded, this guy was not doing a good job. It's not what he does. He doesn't want to do it. He's not good at it, right? All that stuff. And then, of course, Bogwig comes, who is very charismatic in his own weird way. It was pretty easy for him to undermine their messaging, which is what kind of put them in the state they were in. Oh, nothing sounds fine. Great. So they went to kind of take on this thing for themselves. But I had to kind of disabuse them of a couple of notions because I think they had this idea like, oh, hey, we can come in and we can spend 5 minutes kind of dropping truth bombs in this tavern and then we can go off and do other things. And I had to say, no, that's not going to work, right? You're investing time. You can't sit in the tavern and talk to the three guys who are in the tavern for 5 minutes, say, here's our truth, and then expect like, well, our job's done. Now you can go off. It's like, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to spend days. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to come to a given tavern over the course of a single day. It's probably not that much, right? Even if you make a great impression on those few people, are they going to go out and proselytize on your behalf? Probably not. So you're going to need to go out there. Like Bogwig, when he was in there, not that they were seeing it, was kind of like in the town square. Like, he was really doing up a show, getting a lot of people to listen to him. They're going in the middle of the day to these taverns, and the town kind of isn't very depressed. So not that taverns aren't empty at the beginning of the day, but still, and I was rolling dice. And I think they went in the first tavern to kind of give them sort of their dry run for this. There's like four people in there, not including staff. And we role played out a little bit of this first encounter, and they were again trying to just say, "Hey, look, aren't we great? Look at all this stuff we're doing, and this or that." And it was funny because the one player sort of goofed and said, "Like, we're supporting the monsters," and I had the NPC like, "Aha! They even mentioned it. They said it themselves. They're supporting the monsters," and they kind of got a laugh out of that, and they're like, "This is not working," which I think is accurate, but it did lead to a couple things. So they were looking for somebody. So they also wanted to hire somebody to kind of be their tale teller. They'd kind of dawned on them, okay, we need to hire somebody to be our mouthpiece here. But there wasn't anybody. I rolled some dice and I checked out my random hireling generator to see who was hanging around here. And there weren't no troubadours for hire happened to be here. And it's not a trade you'll just see pop up, a ton. So it's kind of a harder sell than just finding like a day laborer type. But they quickly occurred to them between it's like, okay, this is not working. But they changed their tack, which was interesting. So they started, which I think is kind of the better tack overall. I didn't really think about this as they were doing it. This wasn't me like approving and saying, yeah, this what you're doing is wrong and now you're doing is right. But when they started to talk about it, I was thinking, I'm like, yeah, this makes better sense. They kind of started asking more about the people, right? Like what is upsetting you guys, or what are your problems? Instead of just looking at it like, aren't we amazing? Aren't we great? Let's start asking you about you. Hey, tell us about your problems, your issues, these things. Now they're still a little bit fixated on kind of what can we do to solve your issues, and not that that's a bad thing, but I had to kind of explain to them because they were like, oh, maybe we could look, like work sucks. We're sort of, most of these folk are at the bottom of the food chain, and when they go out in the wilderness, which they sometimes have to try to make something happen with their lives because there's not enough work to go around. Like anybody, just about anybody is basically above them on the food chain. Anybody and anything ranks above them in the pecking order of things. So they tend to get kind of bullied around a lot. And so they had this idea, well, maybe we could set up kind of a self-defense academy and teach them how to use swords and knives and blades and things. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting, idea. And then, I mentioned that, for a lot of them, it's hard to afford food. And there's certainly plenty of farmers and farm types, but, they have to give a certain amount of their output to the Viscount, and they give a certain amount. They usually it gets tied to the Brotherhood. And they don't have necessarily a lot left over, and certainly not a lot to kind of give it away. And the stuff that they do have left over, they can sell, they're trying to sell. So they're not a charity. So they thought, whoa, wait, we could open a soup kitchen. It's like, yeah, that's another great idea. But I had to tell them these are long-term ideas. It's not snap your fingers and tomorrow you're going to have a soup kitchen in a school. Like, you're going to have to arrange all this stuff. If you're making a school, who's going to hang around and teach the classes? Where are the classes going to be held? Like, how are you going to pay for all that? Now they probably have enough money that if it was simply a matter of we just spend X amount of gold and out pops a school, like you might do in if you've seen my playing Foundation videos, you kind of you sort of hit that button, pay for this building, and then some workers will just automatons essentially will come around and just start building it until it gets finished, assuming you had all the resources, right? They don't have that. Like, they're gonna have to kind of plan it out and be there for it, or put somebody in charge of it if they don't want to be there for it. And similar for a soup kitchen. It's not an instant undertaking. It's not a soup kitchen spell. You got to figure it out. This will be it would be a long-term plan. And I don't know if I want to say they didn't like the answer. I think it's important. I think it's important for them to kind of get a handle on what's doable, what's not doable, and time. Right. The time I want them to take into account, right? Like I said before, if you want to go in and try to pass your message around, that's an all-day deal. That's not 5 minutes, right? You want to build a school, you want to build a soup kitchen or open one somewhere, you have to do the hang around in town to do that legwork, or find somebody you can trust in town to do that legwork. So they were kind of monkeying around with that. The other PC had gone down to a different tavern, a much more kind of like the lowest, really the grungiest sort of bottom of the barrel tavern, trying to get to the real. If the folk at the regular tavern are sort of somewhat out of work or somewhat impoverished and kind of embittered, the folks who can't get in there and are going down to this other place, they're the ones that are like really, swill mixed with water. Food is halfway, rotten and just, it's essentially the one step up from basically I got nothing kind of thing. And he was hoping to find some people who were more pliable with drink, spend a little coin, get them drunk, and maybe get them. His tack was much more negative. He was on the negative campaigning. If the one set of PCs was trying to continue with their message of supposed positivity, he was there to basically just take Bogwig's name and run it through the mud. He's got STDs. He killed his fellow, and attacked his fellow, and all these things to make Bogwig look as terrible as possible. People weren't necessarily buying that either, but they were more willing to listen in exchange for the drink. So neither one of them was particularly successful over these little mini forays. But the one thing I did give the first party, when they started asking questions about, like, well, how is it affecting you as people? How are you, like what is this situation in town kind of like for you? Which is kind of the first time they're really trying to be really empathetic, as opposed to essentially just trying to be PR. Because this wasn't about PR. This wasn't about putting them in the mix. This wasn't about aggrandizing them. It was really about being the people. I instead of role playing out a bunch of conversations, I treated it more like it was a downtime kind of investigation sort of social thing. So I didn't do it in the first person. I talked about how over various conversations, here are the kind of details that you get out, and I gave them some of the information that we had talked about in the prep chat and some of the other, after action report, campaign diary type stuff, about kind of how Bogwig had resonated so well. And I told them how, in them telling them stories about themselves and understanding that you were their audience, and you and Bogwig, they kind of started to spill a little bit about what for them makes Bogwig this kind of impressive folk heroic character, and what makes the party seem more somewhat villainous, or a little bit less, just not necessarily above board, maybe a little bit off, potentially, either corrupt or lying or cheating. And so they got to work some of that. So it gave me a way of, but this took place over the day. It wasn't somebody just sitting them down and saying, here, my name is Mr. Exposition, here it is. But I was able to kind of sort of, instead of trying to role play out a bunch of this stuff, say, okay, we're going to roll all these conversations, and here's sort of the general flow you're getting, much like you would do if it was sort of a downtime, which allowed them to kind of get some information. I was kind of mindful of trying to not wanting the whole session to be that's just them gleaning this just one little detail. So I get to kind of lay that out for them a bit, and it made sense to them. They're like, oh, okay, they got that. That was good. So they come back, they compare notes. Now there was one other event. When they bring treasure back to turn an XP, they have to get it appraised. And the only place they can really appraise it in this town is at the keep. And I rolled up a little random encounter, and it turned out it was, so the one guy, one player character, Grusty, who's the one remaining of the two guys I started with. One of them left. These other two players joined. The original character from that first part who stayed was Grusty. And their original plan back when the two guys had first started the campaign was they wanted messengers. So they were part of this kind of messenger service that they could do it. They could come or take. This wasn't a case of, so I could just say, you go on this mission, you go on this one. It was kind of like, well, you can go take jobs from the messaging center, running messages, or you can do your own thing. But they were kind of attached to that. So it gave them sort of an outlet to work with. Oh, let's see. Nothing in the chat says, asking what are your problems is good role playing. Thinking of the NPCs as people, not what do we need to do to increase our reputation stat. Right. And I think that I haven't, as I mentioned before, I don't have a reputation set. And maybe if I did, they might have thought in terms of what is our reputation? How can we increase it? But since I don't have one, that wasn't a question they could ask. But yes, I thought that was really good. And it, even beyond the kind of like, oh, they're role playing or not, it really is about like, let's be empathetic, because their tack before that had just been, how can we make ourselves look good? And then with the other character taking the converse angle, how can we just make that guy look bad, as opposed to let's find out what the people are looking for. And that gives you a lot of information you can use to your advantage. If you find out what the people are looking for, what makes them feel good about themselves or their fellow people, or what makes them feel badly about the people they feel like have wronged them, that actually gives you answers to, these are the things that they're kind of ideals right now, and we're not meeting them, even though we think we're propping ourselves up, that we can see how that can be turned against us, right? But yes, it was good. I was really happy that they took that, even though it didn't occur to me until they actually did it. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't think about that, but they were all about being sort of self-absorbed, and now suddenly they were kind of caring. So when I went to go to the appraiser, I rolled something up, and I came out with a messenger, and I decided to have that messenger reaction roll, had a fairly good reaction. So he kind of came up and kind of gave them this kind of like, don't go, the castle's like kind of hostile towards you right now. And I think I had him say something like, I said, hey man, I kind of liked you before you, I thought you were a cool dude before you broke bad, but because he does buy into kind of, he's not someone who doesn't buy into what Bogwig's been selling. But hey, it might not be the best time to go. Like it might be a little bit rough for you in there. And this is where I would say maybe I made a mistake. I don't know if it's a mistake. And Frederick Rourke says, hey, Frederick, you need to drop Scenic Dunsmith on them. I actually have that one. Maybe I can do something with that. And I would say the mistake, or maybe not the mistake, but it was just a really short interaction. And I just wanted to kind of prep them for a little bit of figure out, you know, you may need to come up with a plan before you walk in the place because you don't know. Bogwig's been in there doing whatever, and I was just, it was, I almost wanted to be more of a reminder that you might be going to a little bit hostile territory, so be mindful. But the outcome ended up being that they were just like, well, that's off limits, which is not what I didn't want them. But I didn't have, it wasn't the case where I felt like I could correct them. I kind of let it go. I said, okay, if that's how you want to take it, right? It comes down to a lot of factors. And I don't necessarily always like to step in on those. If the party, someone says like, not a good idea, and they take them at their word and just say, well, we're not gonna try to be inventive or whatever. We're just gonna say, hey man, that one guy told us not to do it, so we're not gonna do it. Okay. I guess you're not gonna do it then. So I feel mixed, right? So I felt badly that maybe they took it as being more definitive and extreme maybe than what I intended the message to be, but I didn't feel at that point that I wanted to step in and say you're reading it wrong, because it was a very fast interaction. The guy's coming out, he's got stuff, he's on his way, sees them, and it's just kind of like, yeah, hey man, I'm just letting you know, you might not want to go in there. It's kind of rough, right? And I think in my mind, maybe I felt like they might go back and say, okay, before we go in and do stuff in the castle, because I mentioned they talked about maybe wanting to get an audience, all this stuff. It's like, okay, maybe we're going to think through how we're going to do this so that we're in the best spot. And I think they also thought that maybe if they'd been able to hire somebody to be their mouthpiece, they might have sent the mouthpiece in. They were kind of talking a little bit about that, but unfortunately, that one thing kind of shut them down on that angle, which was, I don't know, maybe a little bit unfortunate, because I was kind of looking forward to getting some interactions with Bogwig more directly. But they turned around and said, okay, we're not going to do that then. But they might do it next session. Who knows? Frederick Ork says, the town of Restenford from L1 Secret of Bonehill is a good little town that can be dropped into any adventure. Yeah, that's true. And then he also adds, there is the Restenford Project blog with maps and stuff. Okay, cool. Maybe I'll have to take a look at that at some point specifically. So I was a little bit, maybe a little bit bummed out that they went that route. It robbed me of a chance to have those interactions I was looking forward to, but they had other stuff going on. So the thread, right? We talked about in the prep chat how the one character who's been holding on to this magic flute decided to make a bunch of copies of the magic flute, and I was thinking about whether to have this guy that he'd made the copies from swap out the real flute for a better fake flute, and I decided that that's what he did. But it actually came out last night because the guy started looking at his copies of the flute, not out of untrustworthiness, because he was trying to figure out like which one he might try to. So he had this whole thing of wanting to get the other player on board, particularly the one player who he knows wants this flute really badly, to kind of get on his plan of vengeance against their enemies list in town, which is really just the baker at this point, which is where the sack of poop that they'd been filling had been coming from, as they were going to get vengeance on the baker. And the other two players, one of the players is kind of neutral, not really for it, but not adamantly against it. And then the other player, you had the kind of two players in opposing angles. One of them was very much, this is his plan, wants to do it. The other one is like, I really don't want to do it. And this player, the player who wanted to do it, had the flute and the copies that he made, and was going to then kind of do a fake thing, like, I will give you the flute if you come with me on this. And he was going to give him one of the fakes. So he was kind of looking at the fakes. And that's when I kind of dropped the bomb on him, that as you're looking at these fakes to see which one you're going to bring out to kind of tease the other player about, you realize that the one you thought was the real one was just a better fake. To which he sent me an expletive in the voice because we're doing this on DMs, so we're on Discord, so making use of the text channels to do some DMs back and forth. But then he quickly changed tactics and goes, okay, well, I take out the really good fake, and I'm like, here, you can have the flute if you help me. So he was still willing to go through with his plan, but then he also hatched another scheme, which was that he told the party. So this player's class is what I call them fox paws, and there was a way I got to that name, but essentially it was like a class of kind of the Witcher style. He'd wanted to play a Witcher, so taking my inspiration from the Witcher, a class that's kind of humans who are sort of trained in essence to be sort of anti-Fey incursions, right? So Fey will sometimes pop up, and sometimes Fey are just and creatures just end up in the woods or somewhere, and they're just doing their thing. Other times they come out and they are, directly and specifically threatening, human settlements here. And in that case, you have these specialized guys who've kind of been trained from a very young age to be kind of the bulwark against these kinds of hostile threats. So they're kind of anti-Fey trained people. It's my version of a Witcher, is what it is, essentially. So he told his fellow players, I'm going to go try to find another one of my, order, another Foxpaw, to I don't know, look for guidance. I don't remember exactly what story he told, but I want to consult with one of them, because the one the dwarf was going to spend that day. I'm losing my voice. Spend that day trying to learn that spell, read magic, I think. So he knew he had a day. He's like, okay, you're gonna spend that day. I'm gonna go look for this guy, this person from my order, and I'm gonna get together with him. Of course, in the DMs, he's telling me that he's getting together a bunch of the guys, getting in the cart with the first level fighter, the Axeman, and the cart, the wagon driver, and he's gonna book it down to Quarry Bridge, which is the other town that's a little bit more than half a day's ride, depending on how much you're trying to, how fast you're trying to go, to try to essentially find that carpenter, kidnap them, and I guess do something with them. I don't know what his plan was, but he definitely made sure, I want to make sure there's room on the cart so that we can grab that carpenter and drag him on the cart and make away with him. It was kind of a very audacious plan, right, to say the least. Right? I was like, okay, and off he went. So I was going back and forth a little bit, but I was able to do the other stuff through DMs. I rolled a random encounter for his day of travel or half day or whatever, travel to the Quarry Bridge. Nothing really happens. He gets to Quarry Bridge, finds out that the carpenter left town basically just after they did, going the other direction. So, they were going up to Nobbs Hill. This guy was literally going opposite way. And I was thinking in my mind, well, where's the carpenter going? And there's this idea, and I've mentioned this before. In fact, early on, the party took advantage of it. There's kind of a wise woman, might be a witch, whatever, that kind of lives on the on the opposite side of Quarry Bridge from Nobbs Hill, kind of out in the woods there, if you can find her. And she's often someone that they will, in times of need, will go consult or whatever. And I decided that the carpenter was trying to take it. He thought he had he thinks he has a magic suit. Well, he does. I haven't decided about the charges aspect of it, but he has a magic artifact now in his possession. Who could he take it to? Because there's not the old magic item shop, but this wise woman, witch person, someone who's known in the local lore. He's aware of her, knows in some level she must exist in some form, because people have kind of consulted her and come back and things. So you don't know exactly what she is. Is she just like a wise woman? Is she literally a witch? Is she something else entirely? He doesn't know, but he knows this person's out there. And it's the closest thing to somebody who might be able to make a bargain with this magic artifact. So he made off to find them. Now, of course, he had plenty of time because he's days and days ahead of the party. The party, went up to Nobbs Hill. They spent a couple of days farting around. Then he came back. So the time he came, he had at least, 2-day head start. And even on foot, that was enough to get to kind of where he needed to go and get off-road and kind of get into the sticks. And they don't have a tracker. They're on horseback and in the cart. They're not Aragorn, right? There's not a lot of ways even on the road, it's hard packed enough. There's enough going on that they're not going to be able to find that one guy's tracks who's traveling light and just kind of by themselves, as apart from everything else. And then certainly once he went off road, they're not going to find him. So they kind of drove out there. They decided, instead of coming back right away, no, I'm going to push my luck essentially and go out more, try to find this guy. They went out more, didn't find him, spent a night in the wild, just those guys. And I rolled for random encounter, didn't get anything. So his luck's holding so far as bad things happening out there. But of course, now I'm narrating to the other guys. Okay, you studied your spell, all this stuff happened. They were kind of, I think the assumption was that he'd be back within, it would just be like a day trip. Go out, find this guy, and come back. Didn't happen. He's not back yet. So they're kind of waiting, right? And they don't know about the conversations. Everything I've been doing thus far had been in just text DMs. But the DMs started getting longer and longer as I'm having to answer more questions and kind of give them more stuff. So we decided to bring it into the voice chat, and I said, "Look, you can narrate your aspect of it. I'm just gonna kind of supply the other side. So I'm not gonna say anything like, okay, you didn't find the carpenter, right? I'm not gonna blow his plan because they're not there, and I think it's fun to keep even their meta knowledge away from it as long as possible." But he's like, okay, we're coming back. And he's like, yeah, I couldn't find the guy. And he's like, just for you guys to know, like on a meta level, like I was out looking for this guy. And even though your characters don't know yet, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. And I was like, oh, that's fine. He can, they don't have reason to disbelieve him as a player, obviously. And his characters are not together yet. But on the way back, they go back through Quarry Bridge. They're coming down. I rolled up and I got the random encounter popped up, and I rolled lycanthropes again. And I had rolled lycanthropes before, which led to some interesting encounters where they kind of made potential allies with these wolf folk. And this wolf folk was sort of their entree to looking for the Caves of Chaos, because they kind of called a couple of the wolf folk sort of warrior types, and who ended up showing up and telling them, yeah, our leaders disappeared, and we're supposed to be kind of staying close, so we can't go after them because their position is kind of tenuous. And so if you guys could find them, you guys want to be allies with us. If you could find the guy, that'd probably be a good way of making you an allies. But we're not gonna wait forever. Well, there's the other thread that was out there about these gems they'd found and this creature, and they had dealt with that in their last session. But the key thing about that was it made me look back and remember, because I try to track phases of the moon, but sometimes I'll lose track of it a little bit. But that made me was sort of tracking it. So I thought okay, we have these wolf folk. Their leader is missing. They're in kind of a tenuous, really tense spot that's fraught. They feel like they're kind of have threats, at least on a couple of sides of them, because they know the Viscount is absolutely hostile, and they have armed forces at Quarry Bridge. They have armed forces at Nobbs Hill, and they're in that same hilly area, a different part of the hills than where the Caves of Chaos are. And in fact, the leader was trying to find a safe spot to really make a more permanent settlement, and that's how he stumbled into that area to begin with. And then I thought, okay, we got the moon. It's coming closer to a full moon, lycanthropy, full moon. So I had this idea and started blossoming in my brain about, okay, their leader's gone. There's a leader vacuum. And maybe that their ability to hold back their more animalistic impulses, especially as the full moon's approaching, especially for the more juvenile, younger wolf folk, is kind of having this will, sort of a collective will that is personified and symbolized by this leader. You have the strong leader and the kind of force of their will helping everybody else, and they can sort of keep their animalistic side at their command as opposed to becoming a servant to it. But he's gone, and no one's stepped up yet, and all these tensions are coming, and you have younger guys who are maybe more emotional and just have a harder time just tamping it down, and they're losing it a bit. And some of them are kind of starting to rove out a bit. They've been trying to really stay close so that there was to minimize the chance that the Viscount and his forces would determine where they are. If they were running around a lot, they might be able to track them back. They might triangulate them somehow, right? They were trying we got to stay close so that we could lay low until we can figure out a place further off to go. Well, some of these guys are starting to kind of lose their sugar a little bit. And as the moon's getting closer, it's harder and harder for them to keep their sugar. So I determined that these guys were not friendlies. They were not like, hey, nice to see you guys again. Do you have any news? These guys were kind of out for blood. And where the encounter ended up being was essentially at a crossroads where the road to Quarry Bridge hits the road that kind of leads to Nobbs Hill, and the there's like a little ruin here, and they actually met the wolf people there before, and you have to kind of, you have to make a 90-degree turn with your wagon to, to get through the road. And it's a wagon. It's not, it's not a race car. It's on all-wheel drive. So, you have to kind of slow down and kind of take the corner and then go again. Well, even though the wolf people appeared far away, over 100 feet away, they're trucking. Like, where this, they're running, and they know. The idea to me was it was a little bit of an ambush. They kind of hid where they could kind of be sort of hidden. And they know that making this kind of turn where you have a wagon with several people in it, and the one player was on horseback separately, but they know that that they could kind of try to cut them off, right? So if the wagon's kind of doing this, even though they're kind of out here, maybe 100 some odd feet away, they're not running to you where you are. They're trying to catch you. So by the time you make the turn, they're much closer. So I made the the player tried to kind of howl, right? Give that kind of, hey, I'm gonna howl once. It's kind of like, hey, we're all good here. And I told him, well, what you got back sounded not friendly, very aggressive, and very kind of animalistic. And these guys are not slowing down. They are in kind of a dead sprint, and you could just tell by the angle they're trying to cut you off at the pass, so to speak. So he's telling the driver, kick it into gear. Even though he's got a couple of guys with him, he's the other player characters aren't there. He's like, we got to make this turn. So I rolled a D20, and I don't know what check I made. I said, let me just make a roll just to see. But this is a roll under kind of situation. He rolled a natural one, so he rolled essentially as good as he could. So I was like, great. He's like, he's making that turn like a race driver. And the wolf folk seeing it, and even though they're closing, they have spears. They throw their spears, and even though I gave them I think I might have been a -4 or something to hit, because they're sort of within the longer range distance. Two of the spears hit the poor driver Limball and kill him, and then so it became this moment of he's making this turn, it's really good, and then whap, these spears just strike into him. He tumbles off the little driver's bench at the front of the wagon, goes underneath the wagon wheels, just crunch, and then and then I said, well, and the horses, as the kind of the reins go slack, the horses, instead of continuing to go fast, are kind of slowing. And I was like, okay, we better, or I think I'm not sure if I had started initiative quite yet, but I was like, okay, now it's definitely going to be initiative. Ended up being kind of a neat sequence. It reminded me a lot of sequences you might see in a Western kind of movie. You got the covered wagon and one guy trying to make it go, and other folk, trying to, the bad guys, whether they're banditos or whatever. Hey, Ovaltine, you have to head out. I'll catch the rest on the replay. Have a great afternoon. Yeah, you too. Thanks for sticking around as much as you did. So it became this kind of very Western reminiscent sequence of the two fighters, or the first level fighter and the Axeman, trying to grab the reins. The first time the fighter tries to reach for the reins, he can't get it. The other guy tries to grab for the reins and misses, and it was a bad miss. So I had him. He actually fell. He dove and went too far and ended up fell off the wagon himself, but was flat enough, kind of belly flopped a bit, that he didn't get kicked by the horses, and the wagon kind of rolled over him. But now he was out of the wagon. And then the wolf folk are closing. Now they're kind of in range. And I had them attack the horses, which didn't end up working to their advantage. But to me, it made sense as a good tactic. Like, these wolf folk know that on foot, these guys aren't going to be able to outrun them if they are also on foot. But the one guy was on a war horse. And so I gave the war horse attacks. And man, I was rolling. I mean, I don't mind it because I'm not trying to kill the party, but just for the efficacy of the wolf folk, it didn't end up working in their advantage, because they couldn't. That war horse, they just were not hitting it, but the war horse, I guess, in turn was not hitting them either. The player actually did manage to cut one of them down over a couple of rounds, and that ended up breaking their resolve, because the other one had hopped on the wagon and was trying to. I think there was 4 of them, and they kind of split up, and one of them went at the Axeman, who was on the road. Another one went trying to get kind of control the wagon, ended up fighting the fighter up there, and then the other one was fighting the horse and the war horse, and and the player character. The guy fighting the fighter on top of the wagon had the best success. They kind of traded a couple of shots, but they were both fairly badly beaten up in terms of hit point loss, but both standing. And then it might have been round 3 or 4 that the player character was able to hack down one of the wolf folk, and the rest of them decided to. It wasn't the easy pickings maybe that they thought it would be. Having seen from a distance, a couple of horse and a wagon, I think they thought maybe it was easy. They get up there and like, nope, that's a big old war horse, and that's a guy in full armor on top of there, and the guys in the wagon ends up being no slouch either, and even the guy that's on the road turns out to be. I mean, he's a level 0 mercenary, but he was just the way the dice rolled. He was putting up. He was giving as good as he got. I think they might have hit each other once, something. So they were like, nope, this is. After one of them fell, it's like we're out of here, and they dashed off and left poor Limball, dead in the road, and everyone else sort of I don't want to say shocked, but certainly a little surprised, maybe. And the player decided, which I think was smart for a number of reasons. Not only did he pick up the corpse of their man, Limball the driver, poor little out for him, but they also took the corpse of that wolfling warrior, and we ended the session with them carting the warrior, having carted both the bodies back to town, and sort of presenting them to the rest of the group, and like, well, this is what happened to me. He's still holding on to his story of what he was doing out and about, and nothing that happened in that encounter is going to gainsay it. Obviously, the guys in the wagon know what he was really doing, because they're looking for a carpenter, not looking for this other thing, right? So there's a little bit of that. If they do decide to question maybe apart, I don't know, some of the hirelings about what were they really doing, or more details, like his story could easily fall apart. It would have made more sense in some ways if he'd gone out by himself on a real kind of stealth mission. And if he had, and all the encounters had rolled out the same, he would have gotten away, because he could have just put the spurs to his war horse, and the wolf folk were not going to catch him, at least not in their humanoid form. And I don't think they wanted to take wolf. I didn't think about putting them and having them take actual wolf form. I'm thinking that it might be that they might have a hard time getting out of it once they're in it, so that they're loath to go fully wolf. You never want to go full wolf, and they may not have wanted to go full wolf. But that's where we ended the session. So there's some new information out there, and it's going to be interesting. I'm going to be interested to see if they examine the body or not, because the body of the wolf folk, it's going to have details that are going to indicate that the more animalistic happens. Fur on the body, their claws elongating, these things, their canines pulling out more. All these things, maybe even their facial features being more wolfish, to sort of show that they're in some kind of potentially a slow-moving transformation, some other thing to show that all is not well with them compared to when they saw them last. And it also makes kind of an interesting clock, in a sense, depending on how they take it. I'm not sure if they'll put the 2 and 2 together with the full moon, which is when it's going to be the worst. And then they could potentially, as the moon pulls away from full, they might be able to revert more. I haven't figured that part out. It makes sense to me. So I think that's going to be how I play it. But there's a lot of ways the party could take it. And I'm curious if that will play into their actions, how if they're going to see it as kind of a ticking clock, like, oh, we got to do this, or if they see it as like, okay, why are we helping them out? This is just going south, right? There's many ways they could interpret it, and I'm interested to see how they will interpret it. One lesson that I hope they learned is the wilderness is a tough place, and I rolled on the low side for how many of those guys showed up. It could have easily, if it had been much more than that, I think just attrition would have worked more in their favor. Right, they're going to be rolling more dice against the same couple of targets, not have to split their dice as much, and so they're going to, that could have worked out badly, right? I mean, it was kind of one of those, well, you split the party, now you found out, right? The guy went out on his own for not a short trip. I mean, this wasn't like, oh, I'm going to walk outside the village and everything jumped him. No, he took a trip that was like a day. He took a day trip, literally a day, basically a day's travel trip away. Granted, with some hirelings, but on his own, and you can do it. I'm not going to say don't do it. I think under certain circumstances, it's perfectly reasonable thing for potentially for your as a character that you need to do or want to do. The only thing is from a game logistics standpoint, it happened at the end of the night, and the other player had already kind of accomplished everything they were going to accomplish. And I didn't want it to drag into the next night, and it's hard to get other game sessions. I might have been able to say, hey, look, let's do this as a separate game session. I just didn't think that I'd be able to schedule it. So there was a little bit of bystander by the other player. So I guess the other thing is one of the other players, again, just players had to leave to take care of his son was having a really hard time going to sleep. His wife had been trying to put him to bed, couldn't, so she needed reinforcements. So he basically had to go AFK for the last bit to deal with his child. So it ended up just being the two players. So I kind of felt like, well, in that way, it was kind of good. If it was only one other player who was being a bystander. And frankly, I thought it was kind of a pretty interesting combat as far as combats go. So it was like, okay, he's gonna go out. He'll watch that one. And it won't be too onerous. It won't be like I have 5 guys and only one guy's playing. I'm not sure if this happened at the beginning of a session, how I would want to handle it just from a game management perspective. If we had easier schedules, it was easier to get time with folks. That might be when I say, let's do this separately, and then we can backfill in the results. But it seemed to work out okay. It wasn't a really long. I mean, the combat was the longest part of it, and at least we got to do it verbally and sort of in the video chat, so the other player could at least enjoy it from the popcorn on the sidelines perspective, as opposed to just while I'm trying to feverishly type stuff into DMs, and they're just kind of wondering, like, why is Todd gone dead? Or why do I keep saying, I'll be ready in a sec. I'll be ready in a sec. But if I'd known it was happening a little bit, I might have tried to plan better logistically in the game for how to do that. But it does leave some interesting options. So right now, if things hold up, it seems like they're going to be ready to head out again. They seem to have put aside this idea of directly opposing Bogwig at the moment, which I think, and I've been thinking about that over the past few days. I didn't think they would actually take this option, but I think it's actually their best option, because my idea is that Bogwig, he's a powder keg, and he's his own worst enemy. And if they just leave him alone and don't give him outlets, he's going to consume. It's like he's a fire, right? And the fire will burn itself out, or if you keep giving it fuel, it'll keep burning the fuel. And the party, through their actions, gave him a certain amount of fuel that he's been burning through. And then they kind of came back, and their first attempts to try to fix it probably gave him a bit more fuel. If they leave and they're like, you know what, Bogwig, we got other things to deal with right now. They're just more important, bigger fish to fry than you. If they leave him his own devices, he's going to burn himself out. He's going to burn any favor he has with the Viscount. He's going to burn through. He's going to end up, he's got the daughter on his side right now. He's going to burn that thing down one way or another. He's going to end up the town's favor. He's going to burn through that. He's the kind of thing where you're like, you know what, you want to listen to Bogwig, you want to go and you be on Bogwig, you be on their side, and we'll see it. We'll come back in a month and check on you, right? I think if they just leave him alone and give it some time. Just like I said about the party, right? Given enough time, Todd's Law, given enough time and resource, the party will create their own antagonists. You give Bogwig enough time in that situation on his own without sort of an enemy or something that he can sort of channel his kind of craziness against. He's going to be his own worst enemy. So them leaving, it'll be fun, I think, when they come back, and maybe even it will be something that, if they can ever get rid of this curse, that maybe, this whole thing with Bogwig might actually flip back into their favor, provided that they can do some things to kind of get their cosmic good name back. So that's interesting. So I think they might be getting ready to hand it back into the wild. This thing with the Carpenter is interesting, because if he makes it to the to that wise woman, which it's really a Fae person, but I don't know if my players were aware with it, but they passed into the Feywild when they went to the woods to visit that wise woman, and she's really a Fae creature. And if he gets over there, she will deal with him, because This was another Fae. She'll recognize it. This was an item that was given to the party by another Fae kind of sponsor. So there's a lot there that she would want in terms of having it, maybe what she can glean out of it with her abilities and whatnot. So it's definitely something that she'll want to bargain for. And I don't know what the carpenter is going to want to bargain for. That might be interesting. I'll have to develop. Maybe I'll use some dice rolling or some tarot or some other ways to kind of figure out what is this carpenter's personality. What would he ask for? You might want to think about it. You're a carpenter. You've had a good. It's been a decent life for you. You're not starving. You've got a trade, but it's no. In this kind of situation, there's no union. You're not going up in dues. You're not getting seniority. You're just there doing carpentry every day. So yeah, you're subsisting, but you're not living well. You're maybe slowly getting better at carpentry, or maybe you've already peaked out at however good at carpentry you are. So what do you do? Now this person's given you, I wouldn't necessarily say a wish level, but someone's going to give you an opportunity in a way. Maybe it will be above board. Maybe it'll be in its own way not a curse necessarily, but one of those things like like a genie or something where there's going to be a twist. I'm not sure exactly yet what that might be, but what do you ask for if you're kind of one of these, if you're just sort of a lay person like that? I'm not sure, which will make it interesting too, whatever we ask for, if he gets it. And then, the party, or at least this one character, catches up to them. Maybe they'll be in a better position to defend themselves or be in a position of strength. Might be interesting. So I don't know. I got some things to play with there. Bogwig is still going to be there for the moment. I'm guessing when they're leaving, they're going to go back to the Cave of Chaos. They also did leave a letter for the Order of the White Flame. They have Inquisitors, and the kind of contact they'd made at the White Inquisitor. They left a note for him, basically trying to spill the dirt on Bogwig to somebody who hopefully is in a position to listen to them and be powerful, which actually works out. Because I think I'd mentioned also the Order of the White Flame is kind of tired of the Viscount and tired of these slights that they felt were against them, or that the Viscount wasn't doing his job well enough by having things be just so lax and them not taking an active hand in governance, that it left the place open for things like wolf folk to pop up and for whatever evil befell them at their own keep, even though that's really not the Viscount's fault. They're going to try to loop everything in. It's for their right. It protects their self-image to think that our fault that there's whatever broke out there. It was no failing on our security or amongst our people or something else that this happened. It had to have been the Viscount. This is the Viscount. We're here. They're supposed to be protecting us. Blah 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 blah. So now if they go like, hey, you've got this charlatan that's now whispering in the Viscount's ear, that gives them more momentum to look at the Viscount askance and maybe put their plans in motion of deposing the Viscount. So that's another interesting angle. But that's it. That was the game. It was like I said, it was a short session, mostly small things, get a little information, try to do a couple things, and then that one side mission that almost got derailed by some angry savage, or animalistic wolf folk. Almost did some nasty business there, but they made it out of that. And that's where we left it. So again, the next session is going to also be interesting because, like I said, there's, I think they're going to go back towards the Caves of Chaos, but I don't know that. I still don't know if they're going to do the sack of poo at the end of this thing. The one player is still pushing for some bit of vengeance. Doesn't feel like he can leave this insult of the baker punching their barber surgeon, to leave that insult unanswered. But he wasn't able to convince anybody for the flute or for something else to actually do something. So he might have to be disappointed for a while. But that's the game. That was it. So it was fun, though. It was fun. I had a good time. I wish we would have started a little bit earlier, but you just can't help that stuff. Sometimes I wish I wouldn't have had some, bandwidth issues at the start, but I couldn't help that. And I wish that the words of that one messenger NPC, which I just meant to be kind of a heads up, it just ended up being, they took it too much at face value and were just too persuaded by it. Now they may rethink it come next session, and they say, you know what, that guy said it was bad in there, and I appreciate it, but we got to try something, so we're gonna do it anyway. In which case, maybe I'll get that interaction that I wanted for. But I'm not gonna try. You know, if you listen to my stuff, you know that I'm not gonna try to force it. Even though I think it'll be a fun interaction for me to play out and for them to play out, I'm not gonna push them into it. So if they decide like, yeah, we're gonna listen to that guy completely and just not do it, then they're gonna listen to that guy and not do it, and you know, that'll be it. Wrapping this up a little bit, but I'm happy. If anyone's got any questions, comments, anything else going on, somebody commented, so I guess just into general until something pops up in the chat. If there is anything, obviously, if you have nothing, then you know, don't force type something you don't have. Somebody mentioned that I posted from, you know, I've been breaking out the OSR Reddit roundups into separate videos and posting them out. One of them will actually go out this afternoon, I'm pretty sure. But I posted the last one. The last one I broke out was about a one-page dungeon, and somebody mentioned like, hey, that they like that and maybe to do more sort of mini critiques, reviews of these little one-page dungeons. And they pointed me out to a whole that there was a Reddit group actually of one-page dungeons. So I might do some more of those. They're kind of fun. They are short. They definitely have, you know, they are. I know I feel, I don't want to say I feel mixed. So the one that I did was one that it was being submitted to, I guess there's a one-page dungeon concert or some kind of contest or something of that nature. So I feel better about, I don't, you know, that one I feel more open to critiquing it, right? If someone's just posting like, hey, I made a thing and I just kind of wanted to share it. I mean, obviously I don't know if any of these people ever see the videos. So maybe this guy who posted this thing will never ever find my video where I talk about it. But I feel like if you're putting it out there kind of as like, hey, I just put this together and I hope you enjoy it, I'm not going to be I don't want to be super critical on it. I just think it's kind of bad form. I want to encourage people to post their creations and encourage people to put their things out there. I think when you're putting it out there more like, hey, I'm publishing it, or I'm submitting it for something sort of publication or something kind of official, then I feel more like, okay, you're putting it out there for sort of public consumption as a product, as opposed to, you know, like if someone, you know, it's like someone draws a picture and here's my PC and they draw kind of a picture. I'm not going to critique it, right? But if someone puts their picture out there and say, hey, I'm submitting this to a magazine or I'm putting this out there, whatever, and either asks for critiques or is putting it out in a more professional manner, then I might feel like, okay, now you're opening it up a little bit more where I feel comfortable being like, okay, well, here's whatever about it. So I kind of feel that way with the one-page map. So I probably would have to go through and maybe skim a few and see which ones are more in that I think are not just like, hey, I'm sharing a little bit of homebrew that I made just for kicks versus I'm going to be, you know, sharing this more as a product. And then I want to concentrate mostly on the OSR ones and not ones that are 5th edition focused or made for 5th edition, just because I'm not really playing 5th edition right now actively, even though I still follow the materials and I still kind of follow the conversations. But I don't feel like I'm in as good a place to talk about in 5th edition sense. Certainly when you start getting into the hardcore kind of balancing stuff that it's a concern of 5th edition, I don't feel that I'm up to snuff with my 5e knowledge to be authoritative in any way, and to the extent that I can be authoritative at all, to be it about that stuff, I'm really not. But it might be fun to do more of those. So that's something. And of course, as always, in the chats or in the comments after the videos have been published, or in Reddit, or you got my Twitters down there at Hex Pressman. Feel free to @ me with ideas you guys have for stuff you want me to cover. There's so many products out there. Obviously, people will shout me, hey, you got to check out, you know, for Golden Glory, you got to check out 5 Torches Deep. And I'm going to try to get to those. And I have a couple of things that people sent me that I need to go through as well. So I will do those. But I'm always looking for ideas, whether it's hex crawling stuff, whether it's interesting 5e or OSR materials or whatnot. So please, you know, share with me your feedback, share with me the stuff you'd like me to see. If you feel like I cover something that you have absolutely no interest in, then, you know, let me know that too, because it does help. If I'm on something that I think is fascinating, I probably will still do it, right? Because ultimately, I do this to show the stuff that I'm interested in that I hope I can share. Right. So I probably will not, if I'm really into a certain topic and you say like, I hate it, I'll probably just say, well, just don't watch those. But if there's, consistently something like, I wish you wouldn't do this, or I wish you would, let me know. I may not be able to do it. I may be like, okay, well, agree to disagree, pal. But, let me know. All right. I don't see anything popping up in the chat, so I'm not going to keep folk any longer. Thanks everyone who stuck in there. This is, a quiet episode, but maybe laying the groundwork for stuff, laying some supports, adding a little bit more lore into the world. I kind of like the stuff that's happening with the wolf folk. I'm kind of curious to see how that will play out. If they do leave Bogwig his devices, I'm really curious to see how that will play out. As usual, I don't know a lot of what's going to happen. I will, in the prep chats and just thinking about it and rolling some dice, we'll figure it out together, and hopefully you'll join me for all that. And obviously the next game session will be hopefully next Wednesday. That Wednesday seems to be our night that's working for everyone right now. So, but as far as streams go, hopefully I will see everybody tomorrow if I can keep the stream going. So cheers, everybody. Game on. Talk to you later.